Well, good evening, children. Welcome to Bible school again. It's good to see you all here. Where did we leave off the story last night? Who can tell me where we left off? He had one more strike to kill the giant. What was the giant's name? Do you remember? What was it? Untruth. Yes. And so he has one more strike to kill the giant, Untruth. And the giant, Untruth, just got done telling Vitus that he is a failure, that he will never amount to anything. He is unloved, he is unwanted, and he is abandoned. And so the giant is still towering over Vitus. And Vitus is there, and he says, I know the truth. Because he's speaking untruth. Remember the giant of untruth. I know the truth, he says, and the truth will set me free. And Vitus draws his sword, and as he does, he says, I know the truth, and the truth will set me free from every lie that you are telling me. With that, Vitus thrust his mighty sword into the belly of the serpent, and this indeed was the third and final blow. All kinds of vile things flowed from the belly of the serpent. Lots of untruths. Accusations of fellow knights of the king, they all oozed out of the serpent's belly like oil, and it flowed to the fireplace and it burst into flames. The serpent twisted in torment among his own flames. Vitus looked through the flames and spotted a ray of sunlight shining through the doorway. With all his might and strength, he ran towards the light, breaking down the door as he ran out, letting the full light shine into the darkness. And that, children, is the end of untruth tonight, says Father John. But what about the giant? What about Vitus? Alex, Bertha, and Constantine protested. Did he make it out alive? I have an idea, said Dad. It's time that I go and study for my sermon for Sunday. How about you three work out what do you think happens next? And I will get some supper ready, says Mom Susan. Constantine said, I think Vitus escapes, but very narrowly with his hair on fire. Alex says, maybe he collapsed on the ground and turns around as the palace goes up into a ball of flames. Bertha says, along with the giant. Constantine says, and then the giant bursts into flames one last time, and he melts into a puddle of bright green and purple. Boy, they had quite an imagination, didn't they? Well, later that evening, Constantine got bored, and so he just blurted out, I'm bored. To which Alex says, well, here's a book for you to read. Constantine says, didn't you learn by now that I hate to read? And then he got this brilliant idea. He says, how about we play catch, Alex? And he grabbed the flower vase next to him on the stand and tossed it to Alex. Wait, says Alex, but it was too late. It was already in the air and ended up on the floor, shattering into hundreds of pieces. You dropped that on purpose, Constantine says, just to get me in trouble. I did no such thing, said Alex. You did too, said Constantine. I was just trying to have a good time, said Constantine. Is throwing a vase across the room your idea of having a good time, said Alex. You both think that you are such perfect children, said Constantine to Alex and Bertha, but you're not. Bertha, losing her cool, said, we had a perfect life until you came. Oh, so I see this well-behaved little girl has a bunch of spunk in her, said Constantine. I think it would be great fun if I could, Bertha started saying, which Alex quickly interrupted her and said, Constantine, why don't you come and help me with my sermon notes? Now, you have to know something about Alex. Alex loved to take notes of all the sermons that his father has ever preached from the time he was age 7 to his current day. And so he was very proud of his sermon notes. So when he asked Constantine, if you want to help me with my sermon notes, Constantine said, did I not mention to you already that I'm bored? Well, then Alex got this idea. Well, how about we build a kite? Dad has this book that I saw already, and it tells us how to build a kite. Constantine was all excited about this. Let's make a kite big enough that it goes way up to the clouds. So Alex went and found some paper. Constantine said, well, that's enough for the body of the kite, but what about the tail? Bertha says, well, Alex uses most of our paper for her sermon notes. Perfect, said Constantine. Where are they? Under my bed, said Alex, but I'm sorry, you cannot use them. We'll have to find something else, maybe some rags. Well, we need a pair of scissors, said Constantine, and we need them right away. Bertha, can I have a pair of yours? Well, Alex and Bertha were getting frustrated with Constantine, and so Bertha said, Alex, can we go in the kitchen? So they went into the kitchen quickly, and Alex said, what's wrong? And Bertha says, I don't like the way Constantine's talking to me. I don't like his tone of voice. To which Constantine interrupted them by saying, how long does it take the pair of you to find a pair of scissors? Well, Bertha was very frustrated now, and so she goes into the room and throws the scissors to Constantine. Hey, you could have stabbed me. I'm sorry, said Bertha. Sorry I didn't. I know both of you, said Constantine. You both think you're so perfect, but you're not. Well, the next day was Sunday, and as they got up in the morning, Alex was saying how much he loves Sunday mornings. They were so special because Sunday was just a beautiful day. Constantine didn't quite see it, and so he asked, well, what's so great about it? Alex says, I just love the day of rest. We get to go hear Father preach, says Bertha. Oh, joy, said Constantine. You don't understand, said Alex. People come from all over to hear Father preach. He is very good. In fact, we had to start a second service because of all the people that come to listen to Father preach. So this is why you take sermon notes, says Constantine. Yes, said Alex. Well, after talking for a while, Bertha finally blurted out to Constantine, Alex and I were talking last night, and I think I overreacted last night. Oh, you mean when you almost speared me with your scissors? Yes, said Bertha. I am thinking that I was only thinking about myself, and I was in the pit of selfishness. Oh, is that so? Constantine said. Well, Bertha says, I decided to climb up with the cord of love and to show you love, because after all, we are to love our enemies. You are so kind, said Constantine. Oh, I feel so much better, said Bertha. Let's go to church now. And so off they went to church. And after the first service, Constantine was ready to go home because he was bored and hungry. But he was only frustrated even more when he found out that the second service had not begun. And so he came up with this idea of complaining and saying that he felt sick. And he asked Alex and Bertha if he could just go home because he wasn't feeling well. And so they left him. On the way home, Bertha and Alex were talking, and Bertha says, I'm so glad we left Constantine go home. He was fidgeting the entire first service, and I couldn't pay attention to a word Dad was saying. Alex says, well, maybe you felt good, but I don't feel good about it. We shouldn't have left him go home. And as they rounded the corner towards their house, they could see that Constantine was out flying a kite. On the Lord's Day. Can you imagine? And then all of a sudden hit them, where did he get the paper for the tail? My sermon notes, Alex says as he ran up to Constantine. You stole my sermon notes, and you took it all out from underneath my bed, all the notes I took since I was 7, and you're flying a kite on the Lord's Day, right here in the Reverend's yard. Alex takes the kite and starts to tear it into pieces. You are getting what you deserve. You are a wicked, evil boy. Well, I deserve, said Constantine. Here's what you deserve. And with that, he punches Alex. Bertha gets all upset because he just hit her brother. And so Bertha hits him. And there is a full-fledged fight right there in the Reverend's front yard on the Lord's Day. Stop it right this instant, said Father as he comes running up the road. What is going on? He hit me, said Alex. He tore my kite, said Constantine. That is enough, says Dad. Alex, you go to my office. And Bertha, you take Constantine into the kitchen, go to the icebox, and get a steak and put it on his eye, or his eye will swell shut. That's a new thought for me. So Bertha takes Constantine into the kitchen and finds a steak in the icebox and puts it on Constantine's eyes, and very politely tells him that this steak would have been much better served if it could have been served at dinner rather than on a wicked, evil boy like him, and that her hospitality would have been better served with a more proper guest. Constantine says, "Boy, I really feel your love. Do you really think that I like it here, Bertha? What if your father sent you far away to a place that you didn't want to be? Would you feel loved?" Bertha thought about that for a while, and then thought about a comment that he made about his mother before. And so she asked, "What about your mother?" "I don't want to talk about her," said Constantine. Well, while Bertha was lovingly putting that steak on Constantine's eyes, Father and Alex were in the study. "Alex," Father says, "I will always love you, but I need to tell you I'm very disappointed with the way you behaved today." "I'm sorry, Father," said Alex. "There will be consequences," said Father. "But in the meantime, you must ask Constantine for forgiveness. And even if he does not ask you, you must still forgive him. Because, Alex, bitterness against him is poison to your soul. Forgiveness is what brings healing to you both. Alex, you will have to face giants along the way, and there is only one way to destroy them." "One way?" Alex says. "Only one way to defeat the giants of life?" "Yes," said Father, "and that way is with the sword of the Spirit, the Word of God." As Alex leaves Dad's office, he bumps into Mom. Mom helps to clean up Alex's bump on his head, and she too tells him that he needs to forgive Constantine. She tells him that you must forgive, and Alex says, "How can I forgive that wicked, evil person?" Mom says, "How can you not forgive him? How could God forgive you when you were in your wickedness? You must overcome evil with good." So Alex leaves the room and goes into the living room for the next chapter of the story. But on his way there, Alex meets Constantine. And he says, "Constantine, Mom and Dad are both telling me that I need to ask you to forgive me, and I am sorry. Will you forgive me?" "All right," said Constantine. And he says, "I will forgive you too if you were ever to ask me." So as they get out into the living room, Dad begins to read the next chapter of the story. And we pick it up where Phidias is walking away from the castle of untruth, and there is smoke billowing into the sky. The quest calls for his heart to go onward. The path leads to a small valley and into a tiny village, a cobblestone street, little shops to stop for refreshment. But as he walks on through this little town, there's something odd that strikes him. Not a single person speaks to him. They only stop, and they stare at him. And so he walks on and out of the town. And that is when a tiny dart strikes his back. And then there's another that hits his shoulder, and another dart that hits around his neck. And around each dart is a wisp of hatred. And these darts are known as bitter words. As he turns around, he sees a crowd of villagers gathering around him. And the darts come faster and faster. And he runs out of town as fast as he can and appears to have lost them. He comes to a wide field of dirt and dust and rocks. And the sun is now high in the sky, and it's hot on his back, and bugs flying around his head. And he begins to get dizzy because of the poisonous darts and the poison starting to go through his veins. At that moment, he hears the sound of a creek, and he runs to it. And as he runs towards the sound of this creek, he passes a beautiful fruit tree full of fragrance. He would normally stop and enjoy the shade and the fruit, but because of his torments, he did not even notice the tree. And as he gets to the creek, he sees a fountain, and it's bubbling, but never noticed the sign beside the fountain, the word fountain of anger. It looks so refreshing. He did not even notice that there was no moss or ferns growing in the shades or the spray of the fountain. It was at that moment that he heard a tiny, tiny voice. Beware. Beware. I don't see any danger, he said as he looked around and took one large handful of water and began to drink. Immediately something grabbed his soul. He reached for his sword, but his sword would not come out of the case. Somehow it was stuck. And so he took it and he threw it on the ground and said, "This useless thing." And out from behind him came a giant with a deep, rough skin and with undisputable strength. And he bound Phytus with unbreakable cords. "Who are you?" asked Phytus. "I must ask the same of you. I have heard that you are Phytus, the so-called indominant knight." "I am Phytus. I am." "Quiet. I have reserved a cruel death for you, a fitting finish for the one who has killed all my brothers. Eat dust," as he swiped Phytus and knocked him to the ground. "I want you to imagine all the many ways that I could slay you, and when I return, I promise I will surpass them all." So here's Phytus laying there all bound, and he's thinking to himself, "I overcame the giant sloth. I overcame the giant selfishness. I overcame the giant untruth, and now I've lost everything to hate. I have failed my king. Wisdom, come, wisdom." And then he thought, "My sword, if I could make my way closer to my sword and just breathe on the handle." And so he inched himself as he was bound over to his sword and breathe on the handle. "Phytus, oh Phytus," said Wisdom, "did I not cry out to you? Did I not raise my voice in warning to you? How long are you going to ignore what I tell you? I called out and you didn't listen to me. I cannot help you now. I have no power over these cords. Wisdom alone cannot cut the cords of hate." Phytus says, "Well, just hand me my sword." Wisdom says, "I will pour my spirit upon you, and if you turn at my reproach, your sword will become unbound in its shield." "But I'm bound so tightly," said Phytus. Wisdom asked him, "Did you see the tree of fruit as you ran past it?" "No, I must have been blinded by hate," said Phytus. Wisdom said, "The name on that tree that you missed, the name of that tree is forgiveness. And the fruit and the sap are the only antidotes for the poison of hatred." "Oh, how I long to drink from that tree," says Phytus. Moments later, Wisdom somehow got Phytus to the tree, and she stuck the sword deep into the trunk of the tree. And out of the trunk of the tree came clear water, pure water, and it flowed into the deep wounds of Phytus. And as these things flowed into his wound, he began to feel restored. He could feel his strength return. And as the water began to hit the bands that he was bound by, they began to dissolve. "Remember," Wisdom says, "I am as close as your sword." And she was gone. It's time to face hatred. "Where did he go?" said Phytus. He found something laying on the ground as he was looking around, and he picked it up, and he realized that they were poisonous darts. Just in time, he thought. This is what I will need to use against my enemies to protect myself, because I can't use my sword. But wait, he thought. The king says, "Let no corrupt thing come out of my mouth, but only things which are good and used for edifying each other in grace." And then it hit him. These darts are a trap. They are a trap of the enemy hatred. I must break every single dart. And so he began to pick up all the darts and break them in half. And just as he finished breaking the last dart, he saw the crowd that he had ran away from coming towards him. "Are you Phytus?" "I am. I am Formidon, the leader of Minimum. You, Phytus, are an enemy of the king." "No," Phytus says, "I am not. In fact, I'm relieved to hear you say the king. I am on a quest for him. We serve the same king." "This is foolishness," No king will ever send us on a quest. The age of quest is over. The king already defeated our enemy. We pay tribute to him, and he keeps us safe and secure in our village and in his loving care. And anyone who wanders out of his village is wandering from the truth. Vitus says, if I have wandered for myself for years, then yes. But the truth is, the king has called each one of us on a quest. Blasphemy! We are all guardians of the greater truth, and you are an infidel. But we follow the same king. No, we do not. And you must die. And so they all start throwing darts and shooting darts at him. And as the darts come towards him, he breaks out of the circle and he runs back to the tree of forgiveness. And he climbs up into the tree. But as he climbs, he gets tireder and tireder. And then it hit him. If the sap could cure him, what would happen if he pick off the fruit and start throwing it at the enemy below? And so he did that. He grabbed the fruit and he threw it. And as it hit the ground, it splashed those who were throwing darts at him. And they began to find healing. And they accused him of casting a spell on them. But finally, the leader realized that it was not a spell that was being cast on them, but in fact, the spell of hatred was being broken. They cheered and asked Vitus to come down, that he had returned evil with good. And by this good, they were all free, and they were no longer under the giant's yoke. And together we will fight the enemy. Together we will be free. At that moment, the enemy hatred, the giant hatred, returns. Traitor, not one of you knows the truth. Vitus, you say you follow the king? I do. But where are the times that you despised him? That is not true. Your father gave his life defending the king's castle, and the king never acknowledged him or his sacrifice. Vitus, confess what you know is true about the king. And pulling out his sword, Vitus, quote, refrain from anger, forsake wrath. Ha 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 ha. You wave your sword in anger. Hatred against hatred breeds more hatred. This is your fatal mistake. And then there is a massive sword fight. And as the fight goes on, Vitus is knocked down. And the giant gets injured. But eventually, Vitus is knocked down again, and he is bleeding, and the giant is towering over him. This is the fate of the one who dares to kill my brothers. What are your last words before you leave us, O great knight? Vitus says, a gentle answer turns away wrath. What? I forgive all, says Vitus. Hatred doubled over in pain and began to shrink to the size of a pea and turn to dust. The crowd cheers and runs up to Vitus. Vitus, you fought the fight for us. We did not even know you. Vitus lay still. He was dead. You were a true knight of the king. We will bury you with highest honor.
All right. Good evening, everyone. You guys enjoying the story so far this week? Yeah? Are you going to come back tomorrow night and listen again? All right. Good deal. Yeah, I don't have too much to say. I guess we'll get ready to go for class. The teachers are dismissed now to get ready. The transporters, just remember to stay with the groups that you are transporting. All right, 2 and 3-year-olds are dismissed, and 4 and 5-year-olds are dismissed as well. K through 2nd can go. Third and fifth, you guys are dismissed. And sixth through eighth, you guys can go as well. All right, tonight we have Lowell Sensnick here. He's going to be talking tonight. So, yeah, I'll have him up and have a prayer for him, and then after that, you guys can fill in the middle again, like you guys did the other night. So, Lowell, you can come up. Let's pray. Dear Jesus, thank you for today. Thank you that we can all come out here to Bible school. Just pray for Lowell. Just help him be able to talk what he was studying the last week here, and just help us be able to apply it to our lives, and just help it to be a good evening. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. I would invite you to move together at least one of the sides, pull together just a little bit. I find it interesting just watching some of the children here. Reminded me of the Bible school at Martindale. And I noticed second grade is the one that was overflowing, which was typical at Martindale. I saw 6 little people sitting on 3 chairs. That's how full it was up at this end. But that's good. I think if we can get our children taught early on, it's amazing how much they remember. There were times you thought nobody was paying attention and you asked questions and they knew it all. So teach them young. I can guarantee you when you get older it doesn't stick like that. I know many of you, and many of you would have to tell me who your parents are, and then I probably would know you. It's been a number of years since I've seen so many, and these little people might even be holding little ones on their lap now. But it's good to be here. I'm not sure what you were expecting, but this is something that I have been working on for quite some time. We did study this book by Gary Miller at Heritage the last quarter. We went through that, and I was really challenged. And Gary actually made me quite uncomfortable sometimes. And then I was supposed to teach it. It was very uncomfortable. And I feel a little bit that way tonight. Gary, I don't know, did any of you read any of his books? He wrote quite a few books. He understands the Anabaptist. And he wasn't afraid to maybe point out some flaws. And I don't know your church here real well, and I'm not here telling you that I have it all together. I'm not here pointing fingers at anybody. But I think if the Spirit of God is allowed to work, we can maybe learn something and possibly be challenged as we go forward. I'm a visual learner. And I've got here a green light bulb. And when I saw this on the shelf, I said, that's what I want. And I bought 2 cases of them. Because it says right here in the front, 25,000 hours. 25,000 hours. That's a long time, isn't it? That's what I thought. But then you look on the back. In smaller letters, it's designed to last 22.8 years. So I thought, well, I'll put all those in my chicken house and I'll never have to change a light bulb again. But I put the dates on them when I put them in. This particular light bulb that's going to last 22.8 years was put in 10/28 of 20. And it came out in February of 22. A year and a half. But the 25,000 hours sold me in a number of cases, but the 22.8 years is designed on 3 hours a day. Not the way you raise chickens. But they knew if they put that in big letters in the front, it's going to sell light bulbs. Now, maybe none of you looked at those light bulbs, but here is one almost guaranteed you have seen. That's a local farmer come up with that one right here in Lebanon County. And it went nationwide. But what are they saying? 97% fat-free. Fat-free. Fat-free, I want some. Must be good for you. Instead of saying it's 3% fat. You know, is your glass half full or half empty? This sounds just so much better. And you know what happened? Whole milk consumption went up. Because of advertising. Advertising pays. Shopping News used to have in their publication every now and then. It's too expensive to advertise, and I forget what all it was. You don't advertise if you have all the business you need. You have a whole list of things. But you don't advertise. But then if your business fails, then you advertise it for sale. But advertising pays. Back in the 1940s, actually it was before that, probably back in the 1800s, when the manufacture of margarine had started. And the American dairy farmers put up a big cry. It's going to ruin family farms. The government's got to stop it. They would publish pictures of this greasy slime being stirred up in big vats and the worker dropping in a stray cat. Or maybe a rubber boot, just to try and discourage the use. Many of the states, in fact, about 50% of the states in this country, passed laws that if you are going to produce or sell margarine in my state, it's got to be some color other than yellow. The one state even said it has to be pink. Pink margarine on your bread? Doesn't even look good. As time went on, it became accepted. As time went on, they've pulled those laws off the book. But it still wasn't selling. So the company, the industry, contacted a man at Churkins, which was known for his advertising expertise. He said, don't change the margarine, just change the package. Put it in a nice foil package, which at that time was signifying quality. So they did. And they changed the name to Imperial. Doesn't that sound so much better? And guess what happened? Margarine sales took over. You can buy it in any grocery store now. Looks like butter, it tastes like butter. All because of advertising. I hope none of you ever got into this, but there was a brand of cigarettes that was designed for women. Anybody know what that one was? Marlboro? I'm not familiar with cigarettes, but this was one. Marlboro was designed for women, and it wasn't selling. So what did they do? What did they change? What's kind of the logo of that brand cigarette right now? I guess it's still made. A cowboy. They made it a tough, big, Western, cool thing. Didn't change the cigarettes, but it sold. This same man did the same thing with Betty Crocker. He did it with Tide. Changed the packaging, changed the name, and the same product sells. He learned that if you change the packaging, people are going to associate the packaging with the product. And you know, modern America did the same thing with Christianity. Read in the scriptures what Jesus says. Deny yourself. Take up your cross. He says in the Beatitudes, blessed are you when men shall persecute you and revile you and say all manner of evil against you falsely. He doesn't say if the world does, but he says when. And if you look at the idea of crucifixion, Jesus was so whipped and marked up and bleeding, whipped with leather that was bones on the end, and lost so much blood he couldn't even carry. We always see pictures of Jesus carrying the whole cross. That probably was not the case. They usually left the one pole stand in the center. He was just carrying the cross piece, which probably could have weighed 100 pounds. But he was that low in blood, he could not even carry that. That's the Savior. That's the story of the gospel. That's not really too appealing, is it? I can get lightheaded thinking about blood. The vet comes to our farm and wants to work on a heifer. I usually got to leave. Me and blood doesn't get along real well. Even at the birth of our children, the doctor would say, you leave, we have our hands full. But that is the message. That is the sacrifice that our Savior has made. But what have we done with modern Christianity? Now, I'm not saying we have done it here. I'm not saying Parkview has done it. I'm not saying particularly any of our churches. But in general, modern Christianity. The modern day church in America is attempting to compete with Hollywood. We've got to have big stages. We've got to have big performance. We've got to have expensive buildings. We've got to have fun. And you know what? You change the advertising, you change the package, it works. Churches can be filled. Just don't ask me to do anything. I just as soon belong to a great big mega church. I don't know if I'm there or not. I've got to make no commitment. It's entertaining. Sports teams. Nothing wrong with sports. I used to enjoy baseball. But that's what we've adopted. They've repackaged to meet the demand. They've filled it with entertainment. They've filled it with expensive music. We've got to make it fun. What is the purpose of the church? Who is the church? Lest I condemn them too much, you can look at a lot of these modern churches. And who's in at the soup kitchens? Who are in the trenches? Who are helping the homeless? Who are helping that single mother? Oftentimes it's those churches. It's those groups. They're doing that work. They've left some basic biblical doctrines, but they are going out into the world. Why did God institute the church in the first place? What did he have in mind? What should the church be doing? Any thoughts? What should you be doing at Parkview? What are you doing at Parkview? Maybe that's an easier question to answer. But no, that's too close home. Who is the church? Maybe that's an easier question. Thanks, John. We can start by being the hands and feet of Jesus, but who is to do that? The whole church. Who is the whole church? Each one here that is born again. Anything else particular to that group? Okay. It's going to be a group of people. I think we can agree on that. Another common denominator that we would have is what? I know some of you, I could call some of you by name. What's a common denominator of God's people? We're redeemed. It's a group of people that have been purchased by the blood of Christ. We are the bride of Christ. We are the body of Christ. We are the hands and feet of Jesus. That's who the church is. But how do we describe ourselves to each other or to an outsider? How do we describe ourselves to a visitor? The modern church in America does something that no other organization does, I believe. At least more of it. You want to describe the church to someone. Someone that doesn't really have a good idea. I didn't think about it so much, but after reading Gary's book here and seeing his perspective on it, you know how we do it? Well, we don't do this, and we don't do this, and we don't smoke, and we don't drink, and we don't dress immodestly, and we don't. Well, then what do you do? We describe ourselves by things that we don't do. So, are we implying then the group with the longest list of things that we don't do must be the most holy? Some are snickering over that. That's not right, is it? No. But that's the way we have a tendency to describe ourselves. Do we know our purpose? Do we know our job description? Should we throw all rules out then? Should we? Just, that's uncomfortable. We're going to just get rid of it. Awful quiet bunch here this evening. It's following the one that called you. And dare I suggest, if you are in a group, whether it's church or any other group, that everybody does just what they want and there are no rules, everything is okay. Do you feel at home and a companionship with a group like that? People are looking for companion. They are looking for a community. And if you have a group that there is no rules, everybody does their own thing, pretty hard to get close to somebody like that. You've got to have a purpose. You've got to have some sort of structure. But I don't think we want to get wrapped up in having a whole list of rules. And if everybody does A, B, C, D, E, then you're okay. I'll tell the story, and it still makes an impression on me. One point I was leasing some trucks out to a very conservative group. And we were having a bit of a dispute. He didn't want to pay his bill. He didn't want to sign the leasing contract. And I went to his place of business and I just said, I'm here to either pick up a signed contract or I'm here to pick up the truck. It's your choice. I'm leaving here with either the truck or the signed contract. He got very angry. Took his big broad brim hat off, laid it over in the chair. He said, there's the Amishman, you're going to deal with me now. Everything else looked good. He had the full-length beard, he had the suspenders, he had the 2 or 3 inch brim on his straw hat, and whatever. But that didn't mean a thing. A list of rules is not going to bring salvation to anyone. But then what is our purpose? What are we supposed to be doing? What is the church supposed to be doing? Spreading the gospel. Okay, loving your neighbor. Partially answered my next question, but that's okay. We say we're to be spreading the gospel, and we quote Matthew 28 all the time. And I find it interesting, Jesus says, all power is given unto me, and therefore go. But what does that look like? What does that look like? Did you read the book? You know, there's an easy answer to give that, and we quote the Great Commission. Yes, that's what we're supposed to be doing. But then my question comes, and you've answered that partially. What does that look like? Remember the advertising in the beginning? You wrap it in the right package. The church is compared to the human body in the scriptures. Many parts, all working together. And Gary goes and talks about bones and muscles. If I ask one of you young fellas to come up here and move that piano, what would it take? Have an answer? Muscle. And bone structure. Did you ever pull a muscle? Did you ever break a bone? You know, it takes both. And my dear people, it takes both in the church. You have a broken bone, the greatest muscle isn't going to do you any good. Years ago when I had a broken foot, I had a cast on for a while, and I thought, well, the cast is coming off, I'm going to leave my crutches at home, and we're going to up and go. Doesn't work that way. Grandson tore some tendons in his knee. Didn't walk. It doesn't work. And then he likens members of the church. Some are like bones, some are muscle, and most of us are a combination of both. What do bones do? Support. They give structure. They're rigid. They're hard. But nothing is going to happen unless there's a muscle attached to it. To move anything, you've got to have a muscle that's going to pull, but you've got to have a bone that's going to support, or nothing's going to happen. Those in the church that are a bit like bones, they're slow to change. A new idea comes up. Let's review that. Let's look at that. Let's check it out. Let's look at history to see how that maybe played out in the past. And then there's the muscle. Oh, that's a great idea. Let's start with it tomorrow. Let's see if we can't do something better. Let's change things up. Let's not wait. Let's go. So how does that work? Every time I suggest something, so-and-so is going to speak up and says, no, no, no. Or that person over there is always coming up with weird ideas. Why can't we let things the same once? We laugh about it because it sounds familiar. But we need the whole body in the church. We need all the parts. Just like we need bones and muscles in our body. I say we need that in the church. But what do we do with these differences then? What can we do with these differences? That man over there just bugs me. Never wants to do anything different. You do? No, if you were all bones, you'd be a skeleton. If you were all muscle, you'd be just a blob. Nothing would happen. The church has both. Can they coincide? Can they dwell together? Or what are our options? We could just throw all the rules out and just ignore that man over there or that sister over here. We'll just have our own little cliques. Does that sound like a good way to go? I don't think so. Or, that's the way they're going to do there, I just left. And Mr. Bone's going to start a church down across the street somewhere. Mr. Muscle's going to stay where they were. And they're each going to say, the muscles are going to just change so quickly after bit you won't even recognize the church anymore. And Pastor Muscle's going to say, well, Mr. Bone is so tight, or Pastor Bone is so tight and rigid down there, they're just going to get more rigid, and the people are going to leave, and they're not going to have anybody coming in to visit because they are so strict. And you know what? They're probably both right. So that doesn't sound like a good idea. What's the option? John, we need them both. We need them both. We need both within the church. We need to learn to work together. The bone and the muscles in your body need to learn to work together. If any of them fall out, not much is going to happen. And in the church, it's the same way. We need to work together. People are different. There's no question. People are very different. Many years ago, I wasn't aware of it at the time. My parents, my wife's parents, we had picnics in the meadow. They went to the same church. Both families had 4 sons and 4 daughters. My wife and I were in the same youth group. My wife and I were in the same baptismal class. Both come from families that had regular family devotions. We're pretty much alike. But can I surprise you and say we don't always agree? Probably not. And then you get a group this size together. Some of you maybe grew up with horse and buggy. Some of you maybe, and I don't know you, some of you maybe come from a one-parent household. Some of you may have come from a very religious, strict household. Some of you may have been abused. You name it. And now we're going to try and work together. There's beauty in diversity. And if we can remember the purpose of the church is not to dissect and go our own ways, not to ignore it, but be as a body, as a human body, and work together. Really, though, what did God have in mind with the church? Makes me wonder. Little section in here. I'd like to just read. I don't like to read a lot when we're teaching something, but it is late in the summer of 1741 in a small London house on the Brook Street. A man sits hunched over his desk, writing industriously. He had been there for days, rarely stopping to eat. It's been 3 weeks since he left his home. There's good reason for his diligence. He's drowning in debt. And many are saying his work as a music composer is over. He experienced some wonderful days in his past, times when the British monarchs and wealthy audience believed he was the greatest. Yet his fortunes have changed for the worse. The bills are accumulating, the adoring audiences are gone, and debtor's prison looms. Servant carries a tray of food, pauses just outside his door. He wonders if it's even worth the bother. Repeatedly, he has brought meals to his employer, only to return later and find the most tempting dishes untouched. Knocking softly, he opens the door, steps into the room, and pauses. The composer turns, tears streaming down his face. Anyone know who that was? George Handel. Tears were streaming down in his face, and he said, I did think I did see all heaven before me and the great God himself. The next spring, that was performed for King George. Audiences since then have been moved. when they hear the Messiah. Music moves people. If you don't believe that, just look around. Before Bible school started here, there were little ones doing this. But what is it about the Messiah? Is it that trombone? Is it that saxophone? Is it that deep bass? Or what is it? The unity, the harmony that performs, or that produces, moves people. Ever pull up to the stoplight and see that teenager over there just bobbing his head? Something's really moving him. So, what kind of music, what kind of harmony is coming out of your church or my church or the Church of Jesus Christ? Is it inviting to a stranger that comes in and we're downing such and such a group because they're just way off? They just don't get it. Are we like an orchestra that gathers week after week and we read music and we get, and I don't know music real well, but they talk about rhythm and they talk about beat and they talk about everything else music. Next week they get together and they talk about music again and they talk about memorizing all this music. Every now and then they talk about that orchestra that the saxophone player is just way off. He can't hit the right notes no how, and the orchestra never performs, never makes any music. Who's going to go listen? Nobody. Is there any similarities to the churches? What kind of music is coming from any Christian church? Can we have a beautiful harmony that is going to draw people in? People that are going to wonder. They'll think, Gary puts it this way: God desires that people looking at our churches see something so compelling, so powerful, so earth-shattering different from anything else that they immediately sense God's presence. Can we as the Church of Jesus Christ be working together in harmony, everybody taking their place with one purpose, and that is to make harmonious music that the world can't help but come in and see what's going on? Yes, our purpose is to spread the gospel, but how are we going to do that? If there's fighting and discord, it's not inviting. But let's make that beautiful music that the world just has to come and see what's happening. They can't stay away. Never saw anything like it. You know, that's the purpose of the church. And that needs every one of you. Are we going to play in that orchestra? I hope so. Is the music coming out of here going to draw people in? I'm going to read another two paragraphs here that Gary puts in the book. I think he says it so well. We live in a fragmented society. You don't have to go far until you see that. People feel unloved, unaccepted, alone. Vast amounts of money and time are being spent trying to fill an inner void. Many are filling their lives with entertainment, sports, while others search for fulfillment through social media, chat rooms, and other online forums. Something inside longs for connection. Yet in spite of all this effort, there's never been a more socially disconnected society. Something vital is missing. You know, you see a family of 4 go out to eat at a restaurant, and all 4 are sitting there looking at their phones. There is no connection. God longs to fill that inner void of every human heart with His own presence. And He designed loving church communities to demonstrate His love to dysfunctional and lonely people. Church should be a place where disconnected can connect. But this can only occur when believers sacrificially love each other. When tension and conflict characterize a local church, one can hardly expect a seeker to grasp the true nature of God or develop a curiosity for Christ. God promised Abraham that all the nations of the world are going to be blessed. And He worked with the children of Israel for years in the Old Testament. I look at that as the first part, that He was trying to reconcile men back to Himself. In the New Testament, He sent Jesus Christ Himself, died that awful death on the cross. And then when Jesus left, He commissioned you and me to pick that up. Isn't that amazing? The holy God chose self-centered men, sinful men, to be redeemed and carry the word forward. That's us. Let's not drop the ball. We are charged with drawing the world in when they see Jesus through us. Be that light. Superintendents, if you're looking for something for a quarter in Sunday school or an elective, that's going to challenge you. There's a whole lot more in there than what I shared tonight.